It's the 12th of April. (2022). My volume's low. It's the 12th of April. What's going on here? My apologies. I got no idea. It's the 12th of April. I can turn it up over here. Hope everybody's doing good. On the 12th of April, 2022, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org, and I run the Nuclear Super Scumbag Show. You'll understand that in a bit. And you can call me anytime, not just during the show, at 709-589-4406 if you have a legitimate question or comment. You can also text me at that same number. I hope everybody is doing okay. We got a poll tonight. We have a mass die-off event taking place in Newfoundland. Just trying to figure out what's going on with my audio. That's a bit of a weird. Just give me 1 second, because we're pretty good with this. Oh, it's my cord. Okay, I'll fix that. My apologies. I'll get a new cord. There we go. That should be much better. What the hell, eh? How'd that happen, I wonder? Bad cords. I have a piece of equipment I can test cords because I have so many of them, but... Okay, so we've been out on a research expedition. I'm still frozen from it. There's been a mass die-off of species, and what day was this? Was posted a couple of days ago by the media. From Black Tickle to Cape Friel is where we got official reports. So we went up and investigated it ourselves because I'm stupid like that. Not really, but it's a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of time. You're going into the unknown with hostiles, possibly, because I've been at this for so long that I'm not very liked by the industry. They have their personal attack dogs. And we have a rather interesting couple of stories, by the way. And so this is Newfoundland, Canada. This is the East Coast. This is the open Atlantic Ocean. Iceland, or Greenland's up there, Iceland's up there. United Kingdom's this way, across the Atlantic, 5,500 miles or something. So the birds are supposed to be migrating to the Arctic that way. Now they're claiming they got pushed in by storms because, first off, they were starving, no doubt, but we're going to cover the news stories coming up. And so it takes a little while to build the story for you. You wouldn't believe how cold it is. But that tent is a four-season tent. That actually works. So if you go looking yourself, you don't know much about the subject, you're thinking about radiation, and you'll appreciate this, because you got to set the stage for the rest of it. If you're not familiar, you won't be able to follow it, right? So they're going to tell you there's no cesium detected, or iodines, which is the cover story for about 76 years now. And there's over 1,000 kinds of radioactive fallout. So that's the official picture of Reactor 4. Now the experts...
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
Now he's going to try to convince you that 100 feet above my finger, 120 feet. He's going to try to convince you it looks like that. Now, he's not alone. He's got all kinds of media. It's ABC behind me, BBC, CBS, CNN, all trying to convince you that the building to the left, one of the nuclear meltdowns in Japan, is Reactor 4, didn't melt down and everything is hunky-dory, Dana. Let's just play this short clip.
Where I was standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So that was 4 major medias, meant the editors, the videographers, the producers, everybody had to participate in that deception. Why the hell would they create a big deception about something like that, a stupid building, Dana? It wasn't just one, there was 4 of them. These were 190-foot buildings, 150 feet wide. And compared to Chernobyl, they're about 100 times more uranium, plutonium. And as you can see, there's nothing left of the building, just a stump, but they're pretending that it's not. So it's very confusing for the average person who's not familiar with the subject. This is important if you're going to talk about the mass die-offs that are going on currently. And which is in particular is Newfoundland, but other places too. So what? Now Newfoundland is, let me put you on the other screen here. It's easier for me to help you understand. That's radioactive fallout from Japan, by the way. Where the hell am I? Okay, so right here is where the die-off is taking place in a place called Newfoundland. So this is the Atlantic Ocean, and this is the Pacific Ocean. Now, I've done research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia, where my finger is to Alaska for year after year after year, 4 to 5 months a year on the Pacific Ocean. But we're also doing research expeditions on the Atlantic Ocean. And so right now we're currently, this is over the last couple of days, it's we're doing, and you can see the ice.
So how do I take, how do I take this thing?
You can almost tell how miserable I am because we're just waking up, and I want to take the quad and go down to the coastline, but it's covered in ice, and it's just, the thought of trying to sit on that after the night I went through was not really appealing to me. But I've been through a lot. So we've done research expeditions of mass die-offs also on the west coast of Canada, from Vancouver, British Columbia, around the 400-plus mile Vancouver Island, all the way to Alaska year after year. In my better days, this is one of my trips right there. I'm just trying to get you up to speed so you can appreciate the story. These are complicated stories. So I use this boat all the time, and I want to drag it up to the west coast right now, but we'll see. So I do all kinds of research all year long, but I also run these presentations and the nuclear scumbag show, as I like to call it. So that's my zodiac, and everybody you see there is actually me. What the idea of that is, I'm trying to say to you that if I fill the beach up with people, it doesn't matter because I still won't find the species to your left. They're actually exterminated from the west coast of Canada. That, to the left is what it should look like. To the right is what it does look like, because I went out with my trusty sidekick Zoe, and this is right by Alaska on a perfect day. It's never a perfect day. It happened to be a perfect day that day. And you're hid away in shelter. There's 27,000 islands. I was doing the exterior of the coastline, so it didn't really matter. So these species now are 7,500 highly visible species, are permanently exterminated. And not in a good way, obviously. They're gone permanently. Because we went back year after year, the species didn't come back. Now, the difference from the East Coast to the West Coast is that the East Coast, every year or 2 or 3 years, you'll get what's known as pack ice. This is ice that's broken up, but big as a house and smaller or larger, up to 200 miles wide. So when the wind pushes it on the coastline, it scrubs the first 30 feet, the tidal zones and everything else, right, each year. So it's the genetic superior selection that will end up in the tide zones on the East Coast. They'll never look like this. You have a very 6-foot tide exchange, whereas in British Columbia, it's a 19 to 24-foot tide exchange. And so I dove both coasts as a diver extensively. And I love the oceans, and so I provide kind of overwhelming amount of documentation, because I have gathered that up, obviously. And these pictures to your right are my pictures at the same places as they are to the left. But the whole coastline would look like this. There's so many species, you can't possibly get them all into one picture. They're actually exterminated. The Fukushima radioactive fallout actually exterminated it. Okay, so it takes a few more minutes yet to get to the bird die-offs. This was a typical day. That's what a typical day looked like on research for me over the last decade. And last year, the year before, we were out looking for spiders on the East Coast. This was last year. And the spiders are actually missing. You should get about 150 per cubic meter in the forest and about 500,000 per acre. But you'll find them on your houses. But where are the birds that eat the insects would normally eat the spiders on this side of your house? Well, over the last couple of years, we've seen huge die-offs of insect-eating birds dropping dead in New Mexico. It was actually in the millions. It was 190 species, maybe millions of dead bodies, extremely emaciated, and no fat reserves, no muscle mass. They flied until they couldn't fly anymore. This is what we're seeing in Newfoundland currently. And there were various insect-eating birds like sparrows, blackbirds. There was 190 of these species, and they would drop dead, and they were emaciated. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions. It turns out it was millions, because this was early in the story. Massive migratory bird deaths, massive migratory. And like again, it's up to around 190 species were recorded as... it's terrible, frightening, and we've never seen anything like this before. That's a common theme now on these stories. But after a week or so, the cover story comes along. We're going to cover that for you from CBC tonight. So the insect-eating birds are dying. The research I'm doing is that the population of insects, what happens is the radiation sterilizes them in increments over 11 years, and the majority of them just disappear or become infertile and they don't reproduce. So they disappear in increments over the years. Last year, now Newfoundland, this is me last year.
That's that island anyway. Up there.
Now last year and the year before, say for instance, when I'm doing the research in the summer times for the birds in the oceans, the most species I'm seeing during peak period is only around 5 species, very sparingly. And some islands around communities, right? You'll see birds in the communities because of the bird feeders. And the insects are hanging onto your houses, onto your sheds, onto your garbage cans, putting new webs to your vehicles each day, right? Very thin, very weak webs too. But they're not going from your bushes to your trees because they suck up radiation. And so the trees is where the insects like to live. They pulsing energy from the radiation. It's very complicated for the person who doesn't appreciate the whole story. This was written by Yoshi Sumatsu. He was the former editor of the Japan Times, which was the English version, kind of like CBC in Canada, the Japan Times. And the industry came after me in numerous times and put gag orders against me. This comes with the territory. But he took offense to it. He said the guilty verdict against Dana Durnford is a perversion of legal norms that condemns the Canadian government to be in the great banana republic of the North and slavish servitude to the global nuclear industry and its uranium mining profiteers. And he berated the industry for what they'd done to me. Canadian political leaders shot by the country's Canada's Fukushima response. He couldn't get an answer and was accused of fear-mongering right away. Canadian newspapers couldn't get soil tested. Private companies, government agencies, universities adamantly refused to get involved. Health Canada called 300 times background level. And once again, I showed you beginning, there's 1,000 types of radiation. And so they tell you iodine because it doesn't have a long half-life, even though it has 10 half-lives. And so it's very confusing for the average person who doesn't know much about it. But you don't need to know much about it to appreciate this headline. Japan Times column, as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will leak out about Fukushima. So when you see these headlines, these are different medias aggregated, kind of like Drudge Report does. So radiation, it affects all the species dramatically, and this is why we do species counts and why the bird die-off currently taking place is so important. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. And obesity rates now nearly double Japan's average. That the excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Radiation brain damage is manifested as obesity because of the thyroid gland also is dramatically affected. The thyroid gland sucks up gamma radiation like iodine and cesiums and converts it into radioactive hormones, which destroys your immune system in increments over a few years. So if you see people, just older people, for instance, that gather weight right out of the blue, have been skinny their whole life, but all of a sudden gather weight, that's not normal. That's poisoning. You'll understand it if you keep watching. Pneumonia cases surges because it attacks your respiratory system and your pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline glands. And radiation has around 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. And it's not just humans, all species are equally susceptible. In fact, everything with replicating cells is 100% vulnerable to radiation, has no natural immune trigger to defend against it. Your body attacks every atom for the rest of your life with white blood cells, which decreases your red blood cells, which carry in oxygen nutrition throughout your body, or the insects or birds or animals or mammals, not just humans. New evidence has emerged that the radiation in Canada was worse than the Canadian officials ever let on. In fact, what the Canadian nuclear industry, which controls your media, your universities, have all been captured. All the regulatory agencies were captured by this industry in increments over the last 76 years. So you have no functional system. Serious questions are arising about why Canada government failed to alert the public about the radioactive rain. And we had it was a study out of Ottawa, and I'll get to it maybe, 220 million atoms per liter of rainfall. So that's guaranteed to start wiping out all the insects. When was the last time you cleaned insects off your windshield in the summertime? It used to be a couple of times a day. But because it happens in increments over 11 years, Dana, there never was many insects. You'll hear people that can't, are victims of social engineering, I guess is the better way to put it. They're generally good people if they can break the idiot tube addiction. Calgary Sun, no need to panic, probably, about the Fukushima radioactive fallout that rained on Canada. Government hasn't even released the data. Quite the opposite. They had to hold the data because that would have been, what they went and done was invested the Canadian pension into uranium immediately, and also located Darlington and Pickering and Bruce Power, nuclear power plants rather, at $13 billion each for refits. And then they opened imports, the first country, only country for 10 years. Within 93 days had opened the borders to Japanese food from the nuclear wasteland while the meltdowns were raging and no other country would take the food. I'll show you that coming up, actually. New concerns about radiation levels in fish, staggering. It's a major event worldwide. Die-offs of mammals, birds, reptiles in the United States, Western U.S. So many diseases afflicting such a wide variety of animals, like the names out of a science fiction thriller, hemorrhagic diseases, Sylvatic plagues. Here was a study of 360 atoms of radioactive sulfur hydrogen peroxide buckyballs were sequestering in the testicles of the males. Well, the females would have sequestered in the same muscles, heart muscles, organs and stuff like that. Tends to concentrate in the testicles per day. The sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs were created from spraying salt water on the massive inventory of meltdowns. 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They knew about this in the 50s from ocean nuclear bomb tests, that the sulfur would create these spherical balls, like a soccer ball kind of structure looking, but we're able to ingest hot particles and become super hot particles that were very mobile, didn't need jet streams to travel long distances, were easily liberated back into the environment, and they would hang around the ground level where they're pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. And what that does is it starts destroying the chromosomes and the DNA of the species that's habitating those areas. Award-winning project finds seafood sold in Canada with high radiations. Incredible discovery. So I hope people will open their eyes, but they don't really get a chance to hear this stuff unless they find someone like me. All the western United States and most of the East Coast, Midwest Canada are covered with airborne particles based solely on a single nuclear meltdown. And that on April the 16th forecast showed radioactive clouds stretching from Texas to Canada. Newfoundland was, there's many models showing Newfoundland buried in radiation. And the members of Canadian legislative assemblies said it'd be very hesitant in saying that everything is safe. Should Canada be concerned about radiation from Fukushima? The officials say yes, doctors and officials. We're all downwinders when it comes to Fukushima. And serious questions arise on why Canadians failed to alert the public about the radioactive rain. Well, it never stopped now, has it? The Fukushima radioactive plume contaminated the entire northern hemisphere during a relatively short period of time. By the way, hope everybody's doing good, except for the trolls. Let's get into it here. jump right into it right away now. You got to think of Fukushima nuclear meltdowns as an event, and then you got to approach it appropriately. Instead, the industry decided to cover it all up. Hi, everybody worldwide. We're stuck on shitty YouTube for a while. So please give us a share on your social networking sites if you have them. You can subscribe and ring the bell. Click the bell if you want to get updates, but I don't think you will because of the censorship we've been seeing. You can try giving us thumbs up. It's ideally that you share on different networks if possible. Okay, so we had radioactive fallout cover the entire planet. This is a 16-day model. It's only based upon venting. This is France's model. It's an official model. Of many of these we show you are official models. This model is based on 20 days. You see Newfoundland is buried. It actually doesn't even exist in the models of radioactive fallout. Birds are dying by the hundreds in western Newfoundland. And seabird experts want to know why. So does that sound like a normal event to anybody? This is around 600 kilometers of coastline we're talking about, minimum of actual coastlines, right? And we're only getting reports from the beaches in the center of the community. So think about in between the communities. Okay, just to get you up to speed on how this stuff works, 50 becquerels a kilogram causes irreversible heart damage for children. Japan is shipping food over there, and this is why you're seeing all the sick children here in Canada. Rain with 20 million particles. Now, this was Chris Sarkosis from British Columbia. He's a well-known apologist trying to downplay what happened. But the study showed 20,000 particles of iodine-131 per liter. They're trying to downplay it right here and say that it's something that is not. Each particle is pulsing energy at the speed of light. Each particle is capable of causing huge damage to your chromosome, your DNA, because it pulses energy every second for thousands of years. Not the iodine-131, but the 129 was 31 times more. Nobel Prize winner on NHK, the only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. Well, nuclear power plants are always hemorrhaging into the environment. And we've got 5 more to get through. Hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to the radiated playgrounds. Well, anything more frightening than that are the people that gave them the Geiger counters, the universities. Rather than evacuate your children, they said, well, human lab rats, let's get it on. Michio Kaku, a famous physicist from the United States, says human civilization may destroy itself. Human civilization may destroy itself because of a nuclear power plants melting down in Fukushima. And think about this statement from an expert on nuclear: doomsday-like radiation if the number 4 reactor pool catches fire. As I showed you earlier, number 4 is completely... I'd give you a better picture just to help you understand it. But it wasn't just number 4. It was all the buildings melted down at one time. Fuel pools were at the top of the building. There is no top to the building. So when they tell you doomsday-like radiation release, it would be a global catastrophe. It's a global catastrophe. Major U.S. paper, time to quit nuclear power altogether, threatens the very existence of human civilization. Leading director in Japan, nuclear power generation, the only invention to destroy the future of humans. You can't do that without destroying all the species. Zero prospects of ever restoring the fishing grounds after nuclear accidents. All will be lost. This is the reality of the nuclear idiot machine. right currently we're on the East Coast here, was buried under radiation. So we went out and done research expeditions. Just a cursory expedition. So I know people will say, oh, Dana, that's just freezing rain on the trailer on your bike. No, everything is covered in ice, everything. Not just so cold. I don't think I'll ever get warm again after the last couple of days. Alrighty, this is it, I guess. 2 more. Inhaling just one particle can cause a cancer, but it's actually 1,800 illnesses: heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. And there's around 1,800 illnesses you can get before cancer is manifested or diagnosed. Cancer is typically latent, but because you can be eating it, because Canada lifted all restrictions. 6 in 10 Fukushima tested have diabetes. We're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima. I'll come back to this. Let's get on after it here. Canada lift restrictions. Let's just touch on that, I guess. June the 14th, 2011, Canada's lifted all restrictions on food from Japan. I just want you to appreciate what these people are actually like and why you can't actually turn to them to ask them questions. It became the first country to lift all restrictions. There's actually 55 other countries, not 40, continue to restrict food imports from Fukushima. From not just Fukushima, but 14 prefectures. Half of Japan. Not Canada, though. No, Canada lifted all restrictions. And so we see illnesses like crazy. Now, Fukushima Prefecture itself, just one community, Koriyama. I'll give you a demonstration of what that means. This was average disposition 2012. They're only looking at external doses, not internal doses. So the second row is cesium per square meter. These are incredible numbers. You don't want to eat food grown from a place like that, is what I'm saying to you. But it's all of those communities over there. It's all of these communities, not just Koriyama. As you can see, the first line is population. The second line is just gamma. Apparently, beta, alpha, neutron doesn't exist according to these people, or internal doses. So all of those communities are incredibly radioactive. You don't want to eat food. And Canada lifted restrictions on all of Japan, not just Fukushima Ground Zero. Okay, so a few hours ago, this story came out. Starvation led to the die-offs of Murs, which is a saltwater bird in Newfoundland, says scientists. Officials and field teams are still investigating the late March event. Now, this is an old picture. I don't know why they're showing this again, but you can see the dead birds up on the ice itself in the top part of the picture. And 2 weeks after hundreds of Murs were found dead or dying near the town of Hampton, which is at the bottom of the St. Anthony Peninsula, a little community of about 500, 600. I actually talked to the same guy they interviewed up there. And the birds are still washing up. That was a couple of days ago. Now, I was down by the ocean.
Freezing rain all night, all morning. It's noon, I guess. Yeah, 10 to noon. Two guys just came up here because you can see me from the highway where I was too. And one was from Lumsden and the other one was from Deadman, which is just up the road, and this is Dead Man's Bay. There's a little community Dead Man, I guess. And they've been watching, birds been watching up here for the last week constantly, every day in this area. They've been here their whole life. They've never seen nothing like it or heard nothing like it. And so that's another piece of the puzzle. It's another piece of the puzzle that...
Yeah, so a couple of the locals had dropped up to my campsite because Newfoundland, who knows for sure who they were. But they were from Lumsden, which is up the road, and Dead Man Bay, a little community up the road. This is Dead Man Bay right there. You're not very far from the ocean, right? And they were telling me they were washing up each day, hundreds of them, and that government was showing up and scooping them up and taking them away. Now, it was the locals that said the birds are emaciated, not the official government. And Newfoundland's West Coast scientists said starvation is likely cause of death. Dead Arctic seabirds were also found in southern Labrador, Twillingate, Cape Friel. We got some pictures and video, I think, of Cape Friel coming up. So Cape Friel is where my finger is pointed right there. Sabrina Wilhelm was the public relation firm they sent out. There's just we cover several thousand of these Sabrinas each year. These are just apologists for the industry. Their job is to come out and lie to you and say, "Oh, we got it all under control. Go watch your hockey games and leave this alone for the government." So this was Cape Friel. Beautiful Cape Friel. This time of year they feed primarily on fish and zooplankton. However, sometimes the weather can sometimes push them inshore. Well, that's the pack ice along the coastline. It's not very far offshore, right? It's at thickest maybe a half mile offshore. That's on the way to Cape Friel coming back. And there's not much going on. You're not going to find birds along this area, so you got to move somewhere else, obviously, when you come across the ice. But because the wind, I'll talk about that after right away here, actually, about the wind, how the wind blows, and why we're talking about this the way we're talking about it. So I got to move around a little bit to make this work. Let me see how this works here. Dina. Okay, so we went down to Gambo, basically down here, and worked our way up the coastline. Towards Carmenville. And we got caught in the snow. We got caught in freezing rain for 2 nights, and then snow at the same time second. And then heavy winds the day, so I got out of there. Plan is to head back tomorrow or the next day. Now, we talked to all the shops along here, all the gas stations and everything, and asked them the same question from Gambo on. Because the people are going to come into the shop and say things, right? And that's like a gossip center. Particularly in Newfoundland, it really is. This is where the gossip ends up in all the gas stations. So I went and told them who I was, what I was up to, and asked them did they hear anything about it? If there was any dying there, they would have heard about it if it was locally. And so by the time I got to Centerville, I was hearing it regularly, not in Gambo. But once I got to Centerville everywhere I went, people had story after story after story for me, which meant you're talking about a huge die-off. This is a huge die-off. And what you find typically is 10% of what's there. And because you're only getting reports from the community itself, you're not talking about, the birds are not dying and then floating into the communities. They're dying and floating to the coastlines. And so whatever you find in your community, You got to multiply that by each mile of coastline minimum. But you got to think about it's only 10% each time. That's what the officials are going to be doing, the so-called officials. Okay, and so the wind has been blowing towards me, but which is from the north to the south. And then that's the east over there blowing east in towards land. So it's blowing from the north and blowing across from the east. So it should blow it into these bays, right? Particularly because the birds are supposed to be migratory towards the Arctic. Even though they come along the coastline, there's colonies all along this coastline. You know, off of Baccalieu down here. Now, I want to go back and check talk to the people in all these little spots, Alta Bonavista, down to Catalina, along the coastline. And I also want to do it up this coastline too, because that's where the birds... Now, you want to do it on both sides, right? And see where it begins, where it ends, see what else is out there they're not telling us about. And, you know, we can do this in a number of days. But the other side of me wants to go back. By rights, what I want to do is go all the way back to the St. Anthony and set up presentations in each community and introduce them to Fukushima with the topic about the bird die-off, because that's everybody's curious about that. That'll bring them in. We can start a conversation and chase the nuclear industry off the planet at the same time, hopefully. Because that's what it takes. You need an awakening. And you got to sacrifice somebody. So when I was coming back, I noticed somebody was following me quite a ways back. They would just barely show up as they're going around turns. And it started to get my attention. And I remember, when I finally got a look at them, I remember the way where I passed them. And I remember how slow they came onto the highway behind me. I was really curious about what was going on. So I started slowing down. Eventually realized they were slowing down too. They didn't want me to get a look at them. They were mimicking what I was doing. So I was 30 kilometers below the speed limit. They were 30 kilometers below the speed limit. When I slowed down even slower, they slowed down even slower, so I wouldn't get a look at them. And finally I pulled over and they went past me. It was a truck. There were two Japanese people in it. So when I got down, coming onto the highway from Gambo to the Trans-Canada Highway, there's a bridge on the right hand. As you pull onto the highway, you got an exit lane at 100 kilometers an hour. So I'm picking up speed. And a Japanese guy jumps over the guardrail onto the side of the road. There's nowhere to be there, really. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Had a great big smile on his face and something black in his hand. He was holding it, facing it this way, like that. About 150 pounds, with short black hair, and a great big stupid smile on his face. Now, you know, I've been attacked by the industry for a long time. I thought that was a really strange, anyway, encounter. If you think they're going to chase me away, they're actually wrong. I don't work that way. But that was quite the interesting thing to have happen. It was really bizarre because I deal with the Japanese all the time. And if they're operating here in the province, they're here to try to intimidate me, or who knows. Or the ice pushes them ashore, says Sabrina. But we went down there and physically checked it ourselves, but the ice is only at best a half mile offshore. And it wasn't along Dead Man's Bay, for instance, or in the communities where they found the birds, because otherwise the birds won't make it in the shores, see? We're in Musgrave Harbour. And this is the kind of ice I'm seeing along the coastline. Some media is trying to blame this for killing the birds. Yeah, like this one here. And that came out a few hours ago, this story. And they just basically run out of enough food away from their usual foraging ground, claiming that the
So
weather...
you can't get out.
Claiming that they can't get out because of the weather, get into the land, or can't get their food because of ice or because of weather. Look, here's how it works. The birds are migrating. They're not supposed to be in Newfoundland at this time of the year, by the way. So they're migrating along the coast. They got no food. A bird can cover a huge distance in a 1 hour period, particularly with heavy winds, right? And if you're starving, you're going to go looking for food, obviously. Now, we've seen a lot of these die-offs. We've seen the Murs can dive 600 feet all day. They'll actually feed on anything when they're starving. They typically can feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill. And krill live up to 10 years. They're the bigger crustaceans, like big shrimp. But they're migratory, right? A lot of species will travel with them during the migratory seasons. When the number of birds found is unusual, Wilhelm Sabrina says it's not uncommon this time of the year to find seabirds dead from being caught by sea ice in bays. Now, I showed you the sea ice didn't exist, just like a half a mile of it. When the weather changes, the ice moves, right? This wasn't birds can fly, by the way, so a half a mile of ice is not going to be an issue for a bird to fly. So it's quite a departure from this headline 2 days ago. I don't know of any higher body counts. But now she says it's not uncommon. Yet the officials are saying they don't know of a higher die-off on the coastline. Again, you see the ice pack there. But so you can see the ocean on the other side, no problem. But what they show you is a close-up picture of a bird on the ice, which is not normal, by the way, because they'll freeze to the ice, their feet, right? They live in the water. But if they showed you this picture with that context, you say, well, the ocean's only right there, lady. They could fly that way. That's her job, though. Her job is to lie to you. They get incredible education to get that job so they can tell the lie. It's a very simple job. And they don't even, it's not like they do an interview, it's an email. So the industry sends her an email, she puts her name on it. That's how she gets her kickbacks, or keeps her job, and ships it out to the media. So instead of saying the nuclear industry or whatever is saying this, it comes from a government agency. The media does the same thing. They don't write the stories. They put their name on the stories. Public relation firm gives them the story, and that's how they make their money. The media's been bought up by a small group of global investment firms. And so you get 600 medias, say, for one firm. So you got 600 medias giving you the same picture with the same paragraph by the same author with the same story at the exact same time. It's actually known as social engineering. It's been going on heavily for many years. I'll give you an example of it, actually. So they claim it's a natural occurring event today, a few hours ago, but he doesn't know of any higher body count. That's not when you don't know of any higher. You don't know of a more massive body count. That's not normal, see? But this is the official marching orders the media got today. It's a natural occurring event. Don't listen to Dana, Durnford, fearmongering. Birds are dying by the hundreds in western Newfoundland. We covered this last week before it took off. It's just to put that in there because that headline there and this headline there contradicts the official narrative we see. we see now emerging from the medias. Reports range from tens to hundreds at various locations, and reports of dead or dying turs and dove kites have been received from southern Labrador also. By the way, the dove kites are smaller, and they feed on microscopic and little tiny crustaceans. So they're at the totally different spectrum of the murres, the common murres. And there was also, common turs. There was turs, thick-billed turs, and common murres were also originally reported. So that's 3 species. Now they got it down to 1. Now they're saying, no, that didn't really happen. Because the implications of it at 2 different parts of the food spectrum, for anybody who's paying attention, is significant. Of course, they're not allowed to finish the story without saying the words climate change. We are predicting severe weather systems. So now, they're at the end of it, they're attributing it to severe weather. In fact, a lot of people mentioned the word bird flu to me, and that wasn't accidental, right? Okay, so when you mention climate change, where does climate change, that narrative, come from? James Hansen. James worked with NASA. You know NASA. He's best known for his research in climatology, which was created to promote the nuclear industry, by the way. If you got a cut on your foot, we need more nuclear power plants, kind of a guy. In his 1988 congressional testimony on climate change helped raise the broad awareness of climate change. His testimony was pivotal, important turning point in the history of the global climate change, and started the official beginning of the global climate change policy debate, which was where they introduced taxes, right, on all your product, and blamed it on climate change so they can get extra money. And we're talking about billions a year, right? An interview, here's the father of global warming. So the United Nations took his narrative, James Hansen's narrative, Miles Allen narrative. Miles Allen was the guy who came up with, you guessed it, net zero. And so United Nations, which is 195 militaries, by the way, they ain't united, they're just misery machines. And then, of course, carbon footprint. So they beat you down and they blame everything on these 4 entities. So it's climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change. But then it's global warming. It's net zero and carbon footprint. Carbon footprint was created by BP Oil. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign. Do you remember I was talking about 600 medias giving you the same pitch with the same paragraph at the same time worldwide? That's what we're talking about. Right? And so they needed a distraction from a big oil spill at BP Oil. And instead of the typical, how do we bring down your carbon footprint? Yeah, you can guess it. So Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming, is climate change. It's an invisible plume, a continuous plume circling the planet. The model's only 20 days. If you let the model run for a bit longer, it covers the whole planet. The model, by the way, is only based on a small amount, not based on the actual inventories that were lost. Severe weather systems may become more regular, which is true, they are, but not because, it's because of the industry, 76 years of massive releases from the industry is the tipping point, right? And you can trace the actual events we're seeing now back 11 years to Fukushima. You won't see them pre-Fukushima. And what I mean by that, you're not going to see hurricanes coming ashore at 265 mile per hour sustained winds, which is what we've been seeing and in the Atlantic too, right? A couple of years ago, they had 5 in a row that were over 200 mile per hour. We don't have building codes to build infrastructure for 200 mile per hour winds because it's not normal. It happened after Japan's major inventory. And so this plume circles the planet continuously. It's still hemorrhaging out of the nuclear meltdowns. So it suffocated both oceans. It breaks the food chain. It breaks the phytoplankton is at the top of the ocean first. So a glass of water would typically have 1 billion creatures. And 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton. The base is the food chain. Base is the oxygen chain. The base is the carbon sequestering chain. And if you break that sucker, and they did, because it's right at the surface, then there's this cascade effect. But it takes a few years to start playing out and showing up. And at the beginning of the video, I showed you what it looks like from the research expeditions we've done previously over the years. So that's why we're keeping a close eye on it, just to monitor how frequent these events occur. In other words, it's just a normal birds dying, don't worry about it. But it's not. It's multiple mass deaths send scientists scrambling. So why did they have this headline a few days ago, April the 1st, if it's just a normal event, right? And it's the locals that were saying it's emaciated, not the government. The government originally said, well, we got to send it in. It could be the bird flu. That's the first thing they said, because we covered it. And when you look at other species like the storm petrels, and we've done research expeditions 3 years out to Baccalieu Island. Baccalieu Island has the biggest breeding colony on the entire planet of the storm petrels. So 3.3 million breeding pairs, 6.6 million birds. And so you have to get out there in the dark because they're nocturnal. They usually live at sea their whole life, but on land, they only come out at nighttime. So I had to get out there in the dark, and anybody knows anything about Baccalieu Island knows that's no fun. And we went out there 4 times last year in a row in the dark. Stayed out there after the sun rose and circled the islands again with heavy duty spotlights. And you got to realize that I'm actually good at this. I'm really good at that kind of stuff. I'm very disciplined when it comes to the research. So they're acknowledging that the storm petrels are in real trouble, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah. Well, that came right out of the blue. They've never mentioned, that was the only paragraph where I see them bringing that up. And Newfoundland normally has around 46 million migratory birds a year. It's not just 4 species. Unless you listen to Seabird Expert, most of the birds, not all the birds, but most of the birds, get it? They're migrating to the Arctic. They're not supposed to be coming into this coastline. He said there's 2 hypotheses. Either the birds are getting pushed too far towards the shore to reach the food they need, or there's just not enough food. As I explained to you, the food chain is broken. And so this trip has taught me that I can put up with a lot of cold weather, but I'd rather that, see, because if I go into hotels, the industry they can rent rooms there too and get in my face and who knows what, right? If I'm out in Mother Nature, they're not going to approach you there, trust me. He said it's still too soon to know if their food source was contaminated. Now, why the hell would you say something like that for and just leave a blank? What do you mean contaminated? Well, if I say contaminated, what it means is the radioactive fallout. You see Newfoundland right there in the middle of it? Don't worry, because the whole friggin' planet got pounded. But Newfoundland is that little point up there. Hang on, I'll shoot up and point it out for you. Newfoundland's right there. That's the Atlantic, right? So we've done major research expeditions, as I showed you at the beginning, footage and videos of it. Year after year after year. He said, this seems different. It seems like the birds have had the opportunity to move and can move, but somehow by the time they got inshore, they were so emaciated. once again, I don't know of a higher body count. That on its own merit warrants an actual independent research. Dead bird numbers may be the highest in Newfoundland and Labrador's history. Once again, when they only acknowledge the little tiny communities ground that they find in the community itself as numbers, and so the birds are not just dying in the community, they're washing into the coastlines. And you're only going to find 10% in your community that's around your community, because most of the spots in your community are not accessible. So last year we went up there was 15 pilot whales had washed ashore. It wasn't reported on for 36 days. We found out about it the day before the media came out and acknowledged it, only because I had come out and posted a video that I was headed up there. Up behind Cornerbrook, was it, or Stephenville? I can't remember off the top of my head. And here was 15 whales. Here was a lot of, not all of them, because the locals had dragged some of them back into the ocean with the quads, because they were washed up alongside the road. The children didn't want to go to school anymore because they had to drive past the dead whales in the morning and again on the way home, and couldn't sleep. They were having nightmares. So when I got there, they had their thyroids removed, and they were emaciated, and that no species, after 36 days, had eaten them. The damnedest thing I've ever heard tell of, really. There's a large wreck in our province ashore. It's not a rotten ship. Multiple mass turrets sent scientists scrambling. The most dead seabirds ever witnessed in the province. And he said, I don't know of a higher body count. We know it's in the thousands. It's most likely has to be around 500,000 that died at sea. I would estimate it's going to be 1 million birds ultimately. They're never going to tell you the factual number. That's not their job. Their job is to keep you divided and never acknowledge the stuff I'm showing you, of course. And I'm a very open, very public person. I've been doing this for a very long time. And I've become very distrustful of this industry, this deceptive and deceitful and dishonest and disingenuous industry. And I care about the people. I care about the birds. I care about the insects. And our research has showed us the insects are mostly missing right across the country, let alone here on the East Coast. And that there was no spiders in the woods. There was no ants' nest in the woods. And other people had commented on that. So I started asking people in their cabins, how were the spiders and insects this year? Oh, they're pretty. Actually, they've never seen them this year. Same thing last year and the year before, rather. And now last year, when I was doing the spider research expedition, I was 400 kilometers across the province. We were camping. I was by myself camping out. And my YouTube channel had 24,000 subscribers, was just disappeared. And so we started up this news site. This news site, we noticed, has been censored because this kind of a topic, right? The general people that watches it regularly are hardcore, factual, looking for factual information. So they're not just going to disappear. They understood that they knocked down my site. They would have done they would have found me. And all they had to do was go to my website and they would have seen a link to my new site, see? But I'm not talking about all of this because there's a lot going on there. I want to impart some extremely important information about this radiation. That 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans, not birds, but in humans, is irreversible lesions to the vital organs. This is catastrophic to your immune system. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign and innocuous and harmless, right? Now your system is incredibly... So So when you look at this is what it takes for a human, imagine what it takes for a mammal or a bird or an animal, small animal. Much less, see? So in a children, for instance, 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, you'll start to see heart problems. This was a study because of the victims from Belarus and Ukraine after Chernobyl. In fact, right now, there was, just before the war, there was just dozens of these orphanages. Now, who knows what's really going on with those poor victims, because nobody cared about them before, right? We cover it all the time. Orphanage after orphanage after orphanages of rejected children because you have congenital malformations when they're born and were disfigured or just lumps of flesh and were abandoned to the orphanages. And the nuclear industry wouldn't even buy them a TV set or a radio so they live in abject poverty that has been breaking my heart for many years. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. But there's 1,800 illnesses. So this is one identified, and they're only talking about a gamma emitter. Now, Canada has been shipping the food in nonstop. And into the bulk stores, they're relabeling it and putting it on the supermarket shelves. There's no good end to this story, unfortunately, unless we wake up the planet and come up with solutions. And that's what we normally would have done. The elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific die-off. That's true for the Atlantic, as I showed you the models are already over and over and over. Animals starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Mass starvation events plague the West Coast and now the East Coast because that's how it works. And when you go out, because you don't believe what I'm showing you and saying you, and you listen to the apologists, they're going to compare it with x-rays and CAT scans. But when you inhale this, it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, your bones. That's true for the birds. That's true for the animals. That's true for your pets. That's true for your loved ones, by the way. I'm just trying to do the moral and ethical thing and warn people and give them answers and be there available when necessary to help articulate it, to teach the population. You live in a world of deception. I'm going to explain it to you in a 1-minute video that I put together just for you with Patrick Clausen. Patrick Clausen is from a Washington Institute think tank held in high regard. He's going to explain to you all the wars in the last 100 years or so, how they actually got to war. It's known as a false flag, where they attack themselves and blame it on the country they want to go to war with.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So you heard what he said, right? He just, how do we, it's hard to see how this president can get us to war with Iran, so it's best if somebody else started the war. And he listed how other wars were started as an example. So that's how the world actually works, see? Most people probably can't understand that or accept that, but I got nothing to gain by misrepresenting it or lying. So the research, first off, I'm Ran Reagan, and I'm not stressed, but I'm Ran very good. I want to do more is the problem, is what I mean by that. I'm not able to do the things I need to get done. We should be holding presentations in all the big communities along the coastline for the next couple of weeks, right? That would be the best thing to do. That would start a debate. You'd actually have a debate. And then if people watch a few of my presentations, then they can have a real debate, a real conversation, come up with real solutions. You can't pretend it's not happening. That's not a solution. This is what we're seeing them do, right? And then the story the night before I went live that I covered, it's just a complete slap in the face to the Newfoundlanders and everybody else, to the destruction of our ecosystem. Why take that job? Why not get a real job when they got such a great education? Why don't they just go get a real job or start a real business? Why they got to go out and lie to the population? Like, it shows a lacking that their parents had, right? Their parents were obviously failed us by raising them and releasing them into the public. So we've done a lot of research expeditions, and what we're seeing is a mass die-off along the coastline with no clear idea of how big it was. And when we went out and done the research, a little bit of research, a few days of research ourselves, because we're limited, we have limited resources. We have I'm sure we have all the equipment you could hope for, but it's hard to fund this operation. And so then in the last week, there's 3 more donations. I never got a chance to thank or acknowledge that I actually received it. Ian H. donated 100. I got that, Ian. And Shano donated 100, and I got that. And James Lucid donated another 240 plus Canadian, and I got that. And so that was huge. That funded all the running around and everything else, the circus. What I mean by that is because it's a circus. You got to keep everything moving. You're up against all kinds of elements. You got weather constantly threatening to cause you incredible grief. And it's very dangerous out trying to get this. I twisted my knee, but I'm doing okay. I seem to be doing okay tonight. But definitely noticing it and running on a lot of adrenaline here tonight because it's a lot of work to put these presentations together. With the intentions, like I want to get up and run, but we got to raise enough money to get there and get back, right? For fuel-wise and expenses, which is it's nothing compared to what they spend in a day. I could fund my operation for several years. What they spend in one day just lying to you, right, is what I'm talking about. I can fund the research for several years, I'm sure. We have the equipment, we have the knowledge, we have the ability, and we have a mass die-off happening. And now is the time, not waiting. Waiting is not an option. Now is the time, see? If you don't do it now, how are you ever going to know for sure? Ideally, we like to raise enough money that we just go out and rent places in all the community, get a printer, print out notices, drop them off at all the shops, work out the schedule, and go do a presentation in each of those community over the next couple of weeks. That's the right thing to do. If we can pull that off, if we need to raise like 2,000, I guess, to pull something like that off. And I'll take donations once we start doing the presentations. It also means, that I got to lug a lot of technical gear with me that I don't like moving because it's valuable gear and it's expensive gear, right? But we actually have now the pedigree after all these years to actually handle any comment. So even if they bring trolls into the presentation, I can handle it. I can bring up the documentation in real time. See? I'm actually really good at shaking and moving on this topic at this stage 11 years later. I got it all gathered up. It's at my fingertips. If I bring my equipment, we can educate the population with any question they throw at me. There's nothing I won't listen to, nothing I won't entertain to try to resolve it with the documentation. And that's what I do. I provide the documentation, and we also do the actual research expeditions too, right? And we've been doing this kind of stuff for a very long time. And it's there's tough days, man. There's nothing easy about what I do. There really isn't. I got no issues with it. I just want to do more. I want the world to make a stand. This is Earth's last stand, whether people accept that or realize it. You are living in Earth's last stand because of Fukushima radioactive fallout. The only way to extend this planet and give the future to your loved ones and your children and to take back your planet is to do the moral and ethical thing when it comes to stuff like this. It's very humbling, anyway, to be out there and hear these stories of all the species washing up dead. The communities are really curious of what the hell is really going on. They're totally interested. If we can seize upon that, because these are opportunities that really come along where you have the interest. We can use this now. I like to take the boat down, right? But it takes a couple of days to get the boat ready. That's what we should be doing too, is taking the boat and doing the presentations. And just go hammer this friggin' industry. Just go stomp this industry with facts. Let the cards fall where they may. Right? And one thing is, I got the documentation. I could back it up. And I can do it anywhere in the drop of a hat. That's why we do what we do. It's not hard to tell the truth, see? It's hard to gather up all the documentation, but we got it done. It's already done a long time ago. So it's not hard to tell the truth. There's links in the bottom of the description for people to donate. Let's donate enough to get me back out there. And like I said, we want to go do the closer peninsulas, worst case scenario, right? And see if the species died there, get out. The wind should drop down to Morrill pretty good. Right now it's a storm, so I got the frig editor. And nice shower, gonna sleep in the bed tonight, blah, 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 blah. And get up tomorrow morning, aching and pain, and do some stretching, get out and do it again, I guess. That's the... And if not, we got to get back and push so I can do it the next day, right? Because it's got to get done. We got to get it done. That's what this is the time is running out because this just happened. It's now another thing to remember was over the last couple of days, they're still finding birds washing in dead or dying along that coastline. All those communities are. It's still going on. This is why that's why I'm so adamant that I need to get back out there. Just bear with me a second. Because I got to go in. Bear with me, I must... And I can't believe we made it through the night. That's a tough show to do. Trying to tell the story and taking it into context. A lot of people might not have heard of this. Okay, so we got a poll tonight, but we also, the video you're watching right now is this video right here. And if you scroll down under the video, all the way under the video, scroll down, you'll see Dana Durnford shop, but PayPal, and you can use credit cards at my site. So if you click on the nuclear proctologist, which is my site, just give it a second to load up, and you'll see a picture. And underneath the picture is a donate button. All you do is click on that. You can donate with a credit card. And the other one, both of these are direct links. This is my PayPal, me, Dana Durnford. So that's directly to me. So that's the only ways you can donate to me. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good. We got a poll with only 42, which is probably the lowest number I've ever seen on a poll. Is Fukushima radioactive fallout behind the recent mass seabird die-off on the east coast of Canada? And another reason why you can say it is because why are two Japanese guys stalking me? And why did one show up on the middle of the side of the road for no reason? If they think they got nothing to do with it, why would they go to that extreme? Because you got to admit, that's a pretty freaking strange event, but they didn't do anything legal. And so it's not like but I got to make it known just in case something does happen to me that I had a very bad encounter, that somebody was actually mimicking my driving and showed up on the road in front of me. So 91% says Fukushima radioactive fallout is behind a recent mass seabird die-off on the Canada coastline. So we're going to end that poll. We'll end that poll. Ending poll now. And Alex Bachman is there. Concert. Again, I can't pronounce it because it flashes out of my... I'm terrible with names, eh? Hi, Alex. Hope you're doing well. Alex's site certainly grew. We got over 1 million subscribers now. Wow, that's crazy. Good for you, man. We couldn't be happier. Let me say goodnight to everybody. Richard. Thank you, Richard. Obsolete optics. Obsolete optics. Tree fruit. CNCR radio. Yeah, there you go. Alex. That finally makes sense to me. Chelsea. MC. You're welcome. James Lucid. Thank you again, James. You're a lifesaver, man. Really. Huge deal. I appreciate it. Made a big difference. We got a lot of research in that would normally not even be conceivable. It's just too bad there wasn't more people. Maybe not. Who knows, right? Maybe I was meant to come home and do this presentation tonight, right? Maybe that was part of everything, the big plan. Ken Weberg. Yeah, I agree with you, Ken. Albert. Dana Nasana. Stephen Young. Thank you, Stephen. God bless you, Stephen. I was talking to Stephen today on the phone. Not doing so good the last couple of days, he says. But he's still trying. Let me see who else we got here I didn't shout out to. Kevin Blanche dropped in. Hi, Kevin. And Kevin is a well-known staple in an anti-nuclear industry for 60 years almost. Just scrolling through the names. Philip Wan, you're welcome. S.K. Willa. I'm just doing a quick shout out. The show is basically, well, it is over. The Batman. Jade Freeman. Just scrolling up through the comment section. Quick shout out to people and call it a night. Just because I like doing it. Andrew B. I was talking to Andrew last night. Andrew, CFINSTR. He spent a lot of time out in nature, that guy. I miss? I'll get to the most recent comments in a few moments. I'm going back through the old comments right as we speak here. Just Don Vincent. Yeah, I need a smaller trailer. My trailer is too big, too heavy. Costs a lot more fuel to tow around that trailer. That's $1,500 or so. Then the quad's $850 or something. The little trailer is 500 pounds empty. Sometimes it fills it up with generators and all kinds of equipment. John Curtis. We're up through the comments. Back to the most recent here. Hope our hair stays in place. Yeah, me too, Alex. Warren, when your hair starts to fall out from Fukushima radiation, you're in real trouble, man. That's real trouble then. It's happening. More than we can appreciate it. Randy Mill, thank you. Okay, looks like I got everybody. Yeah, don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you can, folks. Albert, I think I said Albert already, didn't I? Just trying to figure it out here. Yeah, it looks good to me anyway. We'll call it a night. Yeah, looks good. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, they're a good bunch, aren't they, Alex? The crew we got here. They're solid. All right, so we need to raise more money to finish up the next few days. I'm not going to go far unless we actually raise the money in advance, even though it depends on what happens, I guess, over the next couple of days. Hopefully don't have to tough it out for much longer. You know what I'm saying, right? The weather breaks and gives us a break. Yeah, Darren James. Chelsea says can't get my my phone to work. I didn't take it in here with me. Chelsea's probably why. Which is bizarre. I always have my phone with me, so anybody will try to call in. My apologies. Oops. That's hilarious. Okay, well, that's it for me tonight, I guess. We'll call it a night. See everybody. I'll post a video if I'm leaving tomorrow. I will post a video. You can't call in, Chelsea, because the phone's not in the studio here. Who knows? I haven't stopped for days now. I'm just doing 500 jobs at one time. I'm desperate to get back out there and start researching again. I hope people find me and donate, and we make it happen. If we raise enough, we'll do presentations in communities. Let's get it on. Let's bring it to them. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. I'll keep you up to speed. When I know, I'll let you folks know. God bless.